this is for Brendan. I thought Redwood Memorial had their own independent water supply from a well.
They do have a water supply from a well, but from my understanding, maybe due to health and safety reasons, they can't really use that water. So what they are currently working on is outfitting their existing wooden tank to be a backup water supply, and then they'll be fully supplied with city water that they'll draw upon during the 4 to 6 hour shutdown period. They're the biggest people we are working with right now to make sure that they are supplied and not inconvenienced. And we're also working with the fire department to make sure that they have, backup fire demand water supplies in place during the shutoff for the facility as well. So that's kind of the one thing that's kind of holding us up from starting this week, but we're certainly getting close, and they should be all good to go.
Great, thanks, Brendan.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to oral comments from the public. So this is the time, if you would like to address the council, you can log into our Zoom meeting, and Sienna will pick up your call and let us know that you are joining us. Any calls, Sienna?
No.
Okay, so we'll close public comment and move on to our consent calendar. We have 3 items: city council minutes from May 11th and May 18th and May 19th, a report of disbursements, and authorize the city manager to submit an application to the California Housing and Community Development for a local early action planning grant in the amount of $65,000 to develop a mill direct specific plan. Does anyone wish to pull anything?
Number 2.
And I would like to pull number 3. Anyone else? All right, Tammy.
I noticed in disbursements, there's a payment to Body Works for the gym, and gyms aren't going to be opening or cleared to open until stage 4, and we're not even close to that yet.
So our city clerk may have more information on that. I don't know if you do or not, Sienna.
I do actually. So I think I don't know the entire backstory, but you're correct. Body Works did bill for June. They were anticipating being able to open June 1st. I know that the governor had a roundtable with representatives from the fitness industry last week, and there was anticipation that very soon here, gyms were going to be given some indicator of how they could reopen if they had a plan in place. I don't know if Body Works was slated to open today. It looks like they did open. If when I drove by, the flags outside was an indicator. I don't know the specifics behind what safety precautions were in place, but I know that Chief Downey was aware and Sheriff Hansel was also aware of their anticipated reopening.
And, so with regard to the payment, if they're not open, we may have to retract that or look for a credit, but I know that they were informed today in talking with our police chief that they're prohibited from opening under the current phase. So again, if they did open, it's going to be something that we're required to look at and do enforcement. And of course, if they're not open, then we'll have to look at adjusting what our payments to them are.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on item number 2? Hearing none, my question, Merritt, on the application to the California Housing and Community Development. When I read the staff report, it talked about we can get money from that because in our general plan, it mentions housing at the mill site. So if we get that grant and then we decide that we don't want any housing at the mill site, how does that work? Is that okay?
So Liz might have more there. I guess our expectation would be that there might be some component of either housing or mixed use. And I think the only real nexus and the requirement for the grant is that there is some element of the planning that does include housing. And again, so most of the site doesn't necessarily have to have it, but there's some areas close to neighborhoods that could provide housing. Liz, do you have any more on that?
Yeah, so the mill district encompasses more than just the old mill site. It also includes the residential areas, you know, to the east and to the north of the mill site along Newburgh Road and for Fortuna Boulevard. So it, you know, the specific plan can be flexible as long as it facilitates housing. It can be improvement of existing housing, you know, opening up those old neighborhoods that have kind of access and infrastructure problems can be part of that. So, you know, we don't know at this point exactly how the specific plan would play out as far as supporting or accommodating housing. It would need to include some, you know, some improvements or some element of housing.
And
but, you know,
one known element that we do have with regard to utilities are some drainage issues along 2nd Street where there's easements needed for drainage across the mill site. So at a minimum, there would be some nexus to improving some parcels where there's subdivisions in the past that were stalled out due to a lack of drainage.
Yeah, and we know that there's some vacant land in those areas that, you know, are having problems. That, you know, it would facilitate subdivision and additional types of housing. So
Okay.
It's definitely flexible.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we can entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Make a motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 3.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Sienna?
Councilmember Glauser,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Stanfield,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Trent,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. Our next item is consider approval of the 2019 Annual Housing Progress Report and direct staff to submit it to the California Department of Housing and Community Development and the State Office of Planning and Research. Staff report, please.
Yeah, so I'll provide the staff report, and I think we'll have Cameron Mull, our Parks Director, in attendance. I don't know if I don't see him at this point, but he may be on to answer any questions. So childcare programs were allowed to resume.
Merritt, we're on the housing one. Sorry.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. Was I on the Parks one? I was on the discussion item. Thank you.
Cameron was going to take your job.
Yeah, no, I was jumping to that one. Liz Shorey, our Deputy Director of Community Development, is going to provide the staff report.
I was hoping you would give mine too, Merritt. Come on. Okay, so California Government Code requires that each city prepare an annual housing progress report on the status and progress of residential building activity for the previous calendar year. The APR, the annual progress report, lists the numbers of permits submitted, approved, and constructed by income category. It also represents the city's progress in addressing the regional housing needs allocation, the RHNA, as reports include income category for the residential building permits issued. And it's also a method for HCD to track and report the numbers and use them to measure and document housing trends and how the RHNAs are being implemented around the state. The content of the APR is directed by HCD and state housing law in accordance with that government code, and it's due every year by April 1st or within 60 days thereafter. And that's one of the ways that the city stays compliant with housing laws so that we're eligible for certain types of grants, such as the SB2 that was approved earlier this year or awarded earlier this year. So just really quickly, I'll give a quick summary of the contents of the annual progress report for 2019. You received in your packet about 6 tables, A through E. And I know that the print was really fine, so I apologize for that. It's just, they actually improved the table this year. It was a lot more cumbersome in previous years. I think they've responded to complaints about challenges with filling it out. And so it was a bit easier this year. Anyway, so tables A and A2 lists the city's development applications that were submitted and deemed complete, but not yet approved for the calendar year 2019. And for the city, a total of 31 single-family permits were submitted, and there were 36 units associated with a multifamily development. That's the Will Adams on Smith Lane project. That was approved and but not issued in that category. And those were all for the moderate and above moderate income categories. There were no applications submitted for very low or low income categories. Table B reports the number of units that were constructed and issued certificates of occupancy. And that table compares that progress towards meeting the RENA allocation for the income categories. So those were units that were actually finalized. And the city's RENA allocation is 161 units overall, and 41 units were constructed and finalized in 2019. But again, only in the moderate and above moderate income categories. There weren't any that were constructed for very low or low income categories. And then table C, let's see, is something we did not have to report on. That's sites that were rezoned to meet the city's shortfall, the RENA shortfall, which we did not have a shortfall, or the land availability shortfall. And then table D is a narrative of the program implementation status from the housing element. So it lists all of the programs in the housing element and the implementation status. And the main accomplishment in the last year, since remember this is only reporting for 1 year and we reported last year, and the main change is that we were able to report on the award of the SB2 grant and identify the programs that would be able to be implemented as a result of that grant. And that includes updating the improvement standards, updating the multifamily development review process, creating accessory dwelling unit standards, and employee housing standards. And then tables E through G are for categories that do not apply to Fortuna, so they were left blank. So that's it on the tables. If you have any questions about anything on there, I mean, they're pretty straightforward. So, but I think just summarizing it, it is hard to, the fine print and hard to kind of follow. There are a lot of columns there, a lot of unnecessary columns that don't necessarily apply to our jurisdiction. And then, so the report was presented to the Planning Commission on March 26th. And following the City Council review and acceptance of the report, actually it has been sent. We did send it to HCD last week. They do allow submittal without final acceptance. We just wanted to make sure we got it in. But then we will be able to report that the council did accept it. So the motion is to accept the report and direct staff to submit it to HCD and also to the Office of Planning and Research. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Any questions? Hearing none from the council, we'll open it for public comment. If you can follow the instructions on your screen, you can call in. All right, receiving no public comment, we will move to a motion.
Mayor, excuse me.
Yes.
I wasn't fast enough with my mute button. I did have a question about ADUs.
Go ahead.
Liz, I was curious. It says in your report there that ADUs ordinance will be brought up and revised in 2020. Do you know when you anticipate having that ready for us to review?
We are still in the RFP process. I think once we finish that process, it'll move forward pretty quickly. So it'll be a couple of months.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we kind of look at some of the other local jurisdictions for some of their ADU ordinances, because Eureka's even more lenient than the state regulations. I hope that that's okay, because I kind of like their model. So I'd be curious to know if that's something you're looking at through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a normal procedure, is to see what the other jurisdictions have implemented, what works for them, what might not work for them. We like to, know what's going on in the cities around us, because it kind of makes things, it can make things easier for the public to understand if they're aware of other jurisdictions doing the same thing. So yeah, I think coordination or just information gathering would include, researching what the other jurisdictions are doing.
Okay, thank you.
So
if I can,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
So onto that, I don't know if this is like a good time to talk about this or not, but I noticed that Fortuna still has a 600 and something square feet, but the state has changed that to 800 and some square feet. So if someone were to want to build an ADU right now, what would we follow? Yeah, we follow the state standards because our standards are more restrictive than the state's. Basically, we are required to use their standards, and they're pretty basic. They have some deviations, like you said, like the size. They're generally more permissive than Fortuna's. We do use the state ordinance. They have a handout, and we use that as a handout when people are inquiring about ADUs. But it's true. That's a good point. If they looked at our code, they would think that we had the restrictive standards. So that's a good reason alone to amend the code. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, if not, we can now entertain a motion. See, I'm remembering the motions tonight, you guys. You should be proud of me.
I'll make a motion to accept the annual progress report and direct staff to submit it to the California Department of Housing and Community Development and the Office of Planning and Research.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Sienna?
Councilmember Glauser,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Stanfield,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Trent,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. Thank you. Now we are moving on to our discussion for Summer Camp Program 2020 fees.
Thank you. I'll provide a summary, but our Parks Director Cameron Mole prepared the staff report that was in the council package. But essentially, childcare programs were allowed to resume under phase 2 of the state and county's reopening requirements in response to the coronavirus. A reopening plan was required to be submitted by Fortuna Parks and Recreation for a modified summer fun and kiddie camp program to restructure to a childcare program. To meet the guidelines, a reopening plan has multiple restrictions and safety parameters that must be put in place so that the staff to child ratio cannot exceed 1 to 10 for the summer fun, which is for 7 to 13-year-old kids, and where the program typically operates with a 1 to 15 ratio. The staff to child ratio for kiddie camp, the 5 to 6-year-old children, would remain the same at a 1 to 6, although the program would not be able to accommodate as many children due to the space and distancing limitations of the facilities at Fortuna's Recreation Hall in Rohnert Park. The lower ratio of staff to attendees will have an impact on the budget. The table provided in the staff report compares the 2019 budget for recreation to the 3 scenarios being considered for the fee for this year's camps. The table shows that the net revenue for summer camps in 2019 was approximately $10,000 with the rates included in the current year's budget. One of the things that the rates do not include is that the salary for the recreation supervisor, which is about $5,000 a month or $10,000. So our 2019 fees, essentially the program is revenue neutral. It's very close to just balancing and no net revenue from that program typically. With the increased staff needs required to comply with public health guidelines and the limited number of attendees, you can see scenario 1 in the table that camp would be projected to have a deficit of approximately $29,000. Scenario 2 assumes a $20 higher fee and would have a projected deficit of $17,000. And scenario 3 assumes an increase for both kiddie camp and summer fun to $150 and projects a deficit of approximately $3,000. One thing that does not include part of our negotiations and our MOU with our employees is that they have their children attend for at no cost, and that's one of their benefits. So the table neglects to project how many attendees would come that are children of employees covered by the MOU, and our understanding of how many that would be is 10 to 15. And so, you know, if it was $120, then it would be, you know, $1,200 to $1,500 difference. So staff is looking for input from the council as how to proceed. We are not able to set a fee or have a resolution changing the fee schedule tonight. Those require a 10-day notification, and we didn't have our plan approved. And so we're a little bit under the gun. So if the council does provide us the direction, we would have the first week of summer fun that wouldn't include the higher fees, and then the second week of summer fun would after, and we would, as we would anticipate bringing the revised fee schedule back to the council on June 15th. So, and we could reflect in the budget what the direction from council is today. So Cameron, do you have anything else you want to add, or is there anything I missed there?
No, you didn't miss anything. I just did want to point out, I did look at my Excel spreadsheet where I did crunch a lot of these numbers, and those expenses would include the staff and the supplies, does include our recreation supervisor merit. So I miscommunicated that earlier. So that is included in that expense. And the reality is this summer is going to look a lot different from previous summers. They're, you know, for example, the kids are going to be in smaller groups. They're going to have to remain with those groups and the same staff for the entire summer, and they can't commingle with other groups. That's going to present a challenge when we're indoors. The children will have to wear masks, which we know is going to make it tough, especially for key campers. So we're planning on spending as much time outside as possible, because masks are not required if you're outside, if you can keep a 6-foot distance. So it's incentive for the children to keep 6-foot distance so that they don't have to wear their masks. Lots of extra sanitation. And I did include in the expenses a little bit extra money towards supplies, because we are going to have to purchase some extra sanitary supplies in order to meet those safety requirements that the county would like to see. So we're excited that we can offer something. We know there's a lot of families that would like to get back to work. They just don't have the childcare secured, and we'd love to be able to accommodate numbers that we have been able to in the past. However, we just can't with the number of staff. It's also been kind of difficult securing staff. So we're lucky that we have a close number of staff than we've had previous years. So it's, you know, I'm not going to lie, it's going to be different and it's going to be a challenge. I will also say that other cities are increasing their fees as well. So we would not be the only local city that's increasing their fees for their summer programs. Our fee structure is similar to most other programs. I know Arcata is also requesting a $150 fee for their day camp as well.
So Cameron, it's not clear what the $150 is. Is that a week, a month? What is that?
That's per week. Those are all weekly fees, yes. So you can see last year in 2019, Summer Fun was $100. Kiddie Camp was $120 a week. Kiddie Camp was a little bit more expensive just because of those ratios. We had to pay for more staff to accommodate that ratio, and taking care of younger children is a little bit more proves it to be a little bit more difficult than the Summer Fun kids. So that's why that fee was a little bit higher. Yeah, those are weekly.
So is there any way to incorporate some of the staff that we already have that are not as busy right now because our parks aren't being rented out and our River Lodge isn't being used and the Monday Club and all those things? Can any of those people?
It's possible. Yeah, it's possible we could utilize some of those staff. You know, I would really have to evaluate which staff we're going to be working with the children directly. Because we like to have those staff have a little bit of experience working with kids. And some of our current staff in other areas may not have that, but I would be open to considering, utilizing some of those staff. And that has been discussed, you know, potentially using River Lodge staff or other recreation staff that may have been furloughed to assist with the program. So the staff number that you see there are rec leaders and rec coordinators. That doesn't include any city staff besides those part-time positions.
Thank you, Cameron. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts or comments?
I have a comment. It's not on the wages, but Cameron, can you check into, because I believe, I don't know if it's age 10 or 12, that kids under that age are not required or recommended to wear masks. I can't remember the exact age, but there is an age that they're not recommended or required to wear masks.
Yes, I did see that children 12 and under are not required to wear a mask, though it is recommended. So, you know, of course, I want to take health and safety as our best in mind when we're running these camps. That's why we think, from the get-go, it'd be good to utilize the masks if we can when they are indoors. But you're certainly correct that I did see some information from the county that said it's not a requirement for 12 and under.
I would like to see us not make that part of our program. It's going to be a mad scramble for every kid to find their mask when they go inside. You're going to waste a lot of time, and I just really want them to be able to be kids.
I agree. I think as long as we're keeping that social distance, that's going to be a challenge in itself too, because these kids, haven't been around other children and they're going to want to play with each other. And so that's going to be a huge challenge to kind of keep them apart from each other. So yeah, the masks and the social distancing is going to be very difficult this summer. No doubt about it.
Cameron, could you talk to the council about pre-registration and trying to size the considerations that you've made for sizing the program to the number of attendees and the requirement to, have advanced registration rather than drop-in?
Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to offer drop-in. So basically the other parameters would be that, families would have to commit to the entire summer because we can't allow new children to intermingle with the group. So, that kind of makes it a little bit difficult as well. Merritt, what was your question again?
That was it. Just that, there will be advanced registration and that families will have to commit because you can't be bringing new children in and out. It's just a major change to you reconfigure from a real camp kind of interactive program with a lot of kids to a program where it's more like a childcare setting. Even though we're going to have it the same name, it is going to be different. And as Cameron described, there's going to be more isolated groups and, restrictions for contact that are going to be challenging.
That is correct. Yes, we will have to do all pre-registration, and we anticipate we'll have to cap it at 60. We will have to cap it at 60, and then we'll have a waiting list after that. And we'll cross our fingers in hopes that restrictions are lifted. And that if so, if we move into phase 4 and we can lift all restrictions, then we can offer the previous summer camp fees and kids can commingle, and things will kind of move into, how they've been historically in a normal way. But yeah, right now we're going to ask for all pre-registration, and we anticipate that we would have 60 kids register before the first day of camp. And yes, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to allow drop-in fees like we have been in the past. We would take anyone previously who needed childcare, but for this year, unfortunately, 60 would have to be our maximum number.
I have a question about, don't you usually bring on temporary summer staff to run your camps? And are they required to pay minimum wage? And Can school students, I'll ask HR also, can high school students get some of their volunteer hours as volunteers? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, we have an LIT program. It's called a Leader in Training program for any younger people who might be interested in becoming a rec leader or rec coordinator later in life. So we can certainly use that extra assistance. We have a couple LITs lined up for the summer. And the 20 staff that you see there on that list are all part-time staff, and a lot of them are seasonal. Luckily for us this year, the bulk of those are returners. I want to say 16 of those 20 are returning staff or staff that work in other recreation programs for us. And we've hired 4 new staff. And then of course the training that's going to have to go along with new staff is going to be quite extensive because there's going to be a lot of safety precautions that they're going to have to take into account that they haven't had to before.
So, I mean, this is a hard choice because families are suffering right now and loss of jobs and so forth. Is there a way to, if we have to choose scenario number 3 to be fiscally responsible, is there a way that we can bill out beyond the closure of summer camp and maybe just defer our payments to keep it reasonable for people that like 75 a week and then go through the next 6 months instead of the next 3 months?
Oh, I see. So you mean like take payments after camp's done for the remaining fees? I think that's probably something we could.
They're paying.
If that's the direction the council has, we can do a payment plan. I mean, I think the important thing for the city is how it all balances out over the fiscal year. I don't know if our finance director has anything, but yes, that is something we can consider, but not something we've done in the past.
And I can also speak to the fact that we do have scholarships. We have $3,000 worth of scholarships available to us from Humboldt Area Foundation. So certainly families that don't feel like they can afford that $150 a week, they can apply for a scholarship. And we have $3,000 that we can give out there. I know. I mean, I can just speak to even my personal, as an example is, for me to be able to work and for my wife to be able to go to work, we have to hire a babysitter. And so I'm paying about $100 a day for a babysitter right now. So for me to be able to pay $150 a week for my kid to come to camp, I'd be saving quite a bit of money. And I would think that there are some families that are in a similar situation. And when you break down that 150, though it seems high, our fees have not increased in quite some time. And it breaks down to a $3 an hour childcare for each child. So it's still pretty darn reasonable. The fact remains that because, our fees haven't been raised in a number of years, minimum wage has increased. So that's why our staffing expenses have gone up.
So 3,000 divided by 150 gives 20 scholarships. So that's a third of the program if people needed it.
Yep.
So I think that's pretty good. The other thing would be if it went beyond there and people didn't need a full scholarship, can you bill them half and so the scholarship money goes further? Or do you offer just whole scholarships?
I think so. I think right now we could probably do anything, to try to help families a little bit. So we could do partial scholarships even, and then we could stretch it out so that, almost everybody could get part of the scholarship. Tony worked it out to where, everybody could get a $50 discount throughout the summer at some point. So we could even do that where everybody gets 1 week where they only pay $100. However, I'd be more inclined to help those families that really need it instead of just spreading it between everybody.
Right.
So,
but some people are in a position to pay something, so they wouldn't have 100% scholarship. And I don't know books and what that does for the workload on your part, but it seems like that would stretch it out a little bit further. And then if people were really in a jam and the scholarship money was gone, if maybe we could spread the payments out a little bit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we're happy to bring more alternatives back with the revised budget. We do want to try to make whatever the projection is consistent with the budget for the budget workshop on Wednesday. So I guess what we're looking for is direction from council. Again, not any type of emotion, but just some consensus. Are there alternatives that you would like to see that you don't see here? Really just a sense of what the council would want to do with this.
And I can say, I hate to, put more pressure on everyone, but we've had a lot of calls from families and we're 2 weeks out from starting camp today. And a lot of families are curious what the fees are going to be, if we can even offer camp, those kinds of things. So we'd like to give them some answers sooner than later, as far as what that might look like and be able to offer that. But certainly we can, still pre-register people without, 100% knowing what those fees are going to be. It's going to take some organization once we do have the kids to put them in the correct group. So what we're going to do is try to put kids in groups of the same age. So you got 7-year-olds with 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds together. So there's definitely going to have to be some planning involved once we have everyone registered. So the sooner we can have everyone registered, the better. And I know this is kind of coming in late, but we've been kind of just waiting till we can move into phase 2 and apply for the reopening plan.
This is still way cheaper than what you'd be paying if you're paying Wake daycare.
We
creative, but I
We
don't want
still
to.
haven't. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, I don't know if I'm putting my fundraising hat on or not, so I apologize if this is off course, but could we do something to host a drive-in style movie with our new blow-up screen and charge per vehicle for kiddie camp? $5 a car, $10 a car. Just do something fun so people can make a very small donation that could go a long way, that we could somehow help our program along. And maybe that's too late in the game to make that fly, but it's an idea.
No, I think certainly there's avenues for additional revenue through fundraising. I guess, in that scenario, particularly, I think it would be tough just to have a gathering, even if people are in their vehicles in the park at all. I hesitate to do that. I know there's other groups that would like to do that, and we've kind of turned them away for that reason, just because it is still a public gathering. But, certainly we can get creative and come up with ways to raise some money for the program if we felt like it was necessary.
In my report later, I'll tell you how impressed I was with Fortuna High and how they did theirs. So I thought if there's any way to pull off something like that, that'd be phenomenal.
And they had what was essentially a drive-in movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say that we still have not specified which one of the scenarios that we need to follow through on, and that's scenario number 3. As for tweaking it for payment programs, which, as Meredith said, that is unusual, that we have not done. It's first come, first serve. Half of the people that normally would be taking advantage of it would not be eligible. So we just have to advertise it and let people commit to being registered and do a financial commitment for at least 1 week to show that they're in it, rather than trying to play the game of running and not paying.
Yeah, and our plan was to just, charge people by the week. Typically we've allowed people to pay in advance and even get a discount. But we figured just a weekly payments, since there may be an increase in fees, would be a lot easier on families. And of course, some families can apply for changing tides as well. There are other avenues to find ways to pay for camp for families. And we do accept changing tides.
So is everyone kind of looking at scenario 3?
I think so.
Reluctantly.
Okay. So there's your
So
direction.
we can bring that back, and along with any other fundraising or other ideas that we have, to the fee schedule meeting on the 15th.
I like the idea of a drive-in movie. Come on, you guys, let's not be stick in the muds. We've got drive-in graduations. We've got drive-by parades. We can do something.
Oh, I agree with you. They just had a drive-in movie on Friday night, and there's got to be a way to do it.
There is. We just do it. It's simple.
Okay, well, thanks. I think that gives us the direction that we need. And again, the council can always take that up if you have different ideas when we come back and we revisit the fee schedule on the 15th.
And I would just encourage us to use existing staff as much as we can instead of hiring extra people. So, too bad I have a day job because I'm fun. I love kids. Okay, moving on to city manager's report.
So I'd like to review the upcoming meeting schedule. As I've mentioned a couple times already, we have our special budget meeting on Wednesday, June 3rd. That'll be at 8:30 a.m. and that'll be via a teleconference using a Zoom meeting. And then our next regular meeting will be on, I said the special budget meeting's on June 3rd and the regular council meeting is on June 15th at 6:00 p.m. The next planning commission will be on June 9th. It's possible that we will cancel that meeting. Right now, we don't have any agenda items that need to be placed on that meeting now. So it's scheduled tentatively for June 9th with a possible cancellation. The next Measure E meeting date is September 15th. And the next regularly scheduled Roner Community Recreation and Park District meeting was for June 3rd. That's been canceled. The next meeting that we anticipate having will be on July 1st. So that's it for the upcoming meetings. As Brendan mentioned earlier in his presentation regarding the Jameson Creek Culvert project, there are a number of construction projects happening around town, and Jameson Creek is just starting with the utility relocation, followed shortly by the heavier construction and the road closure. You may have noticed a number of workers around town. The Highway Safety Improvement Program project, which is including a number of enhanced safety features at various crossings throughout the city, is going in. Essentially what they're doing is putting in new crosswalks, putting in the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and then putting striping on some of the streets where there wasn't striping before. So that's happening. Also, the long awaited and asked about Safe Route to School project around South School, the area near on Newburgh Road, just right off of Fortuna Boulevard in front of South School. The contractor has started work within the parking lot and making some of those access and safety improvements for children walking and biking to school to get access to their classroom area. And then also there will be sidewalks on Lawndale and some other curb ramps, I think down on the south end of Lawndale around 2nd. So that work is happening. It's been one that's been contemplated for a long time. Both of those projects are grant funded. There is a small contribution of $7,000 for the Safe Route to School project. So that's about an $860,000 project, and the HSIP, I can't remember, but I think it's around 400,000. That's approximate. Staff is very close to completing a reopening plan for City Hall, consistent with the guidelines that other businesses are complying with and submitting to the county. Although the city's not required because it's providing essential service, we are going through all those steps and making sure that we're putting the safety precautions in place, including modifications to how people will queue for the counters at the police and administration service windows, designation on the floor of where people will stand in line. There will be health monitoring for employees. So by buying some of the non-contact thermometers and having self-reporting on health monitoring to make sure that nobody comes to work sick, stringent sanitation protocols, and other items like that, and education, and really designating who's responsible for making many of the things that have to happen. So we're looking forward to that. Our anticipated opening date for City Hall and the police facility right now are on June 8th. We're also considering holding council meetings in council chambers. Unfortunately, public gatherings are still prohibited under the current rules under the phase 2 reopening, but it is possible that we could have council meetings in council chambers. We'd have to space the council out and use staff tables and move staff into the audience. Again, the public couldn't be there. One of the things is, even in indoor buildings, the council would have to wear face masks if we want to do that. So we haven't made a final decision on that. I'll be looking for input from the council at a later date when we start outlining what would have to happen for that to proceed. And then one of the other things, you may have noticed that a number of cities are easing the requirements and waiving fees for encroachment permits for businesses that want to advertise or have outdoor dining. And so I'm considering right now waiving fees for encroachment permits on the sidewalk and allowing some outdoor seating where businesses can expand when ultimately they reopen. They will have limited seating due to some of the spacing requirements. So we will consider where this can be done safely and waiving the encroachment fees to support those businesses to have more tables so they can generate revenue during this emergency. And then a big one is we're continuing to work on the budget, and we're looking forward to the budget meeting on this Wednesday and adoption of the city budget. So that's all I have in my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Merritt? Okay, future agenda items. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to city council reports and comments. Dean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last Thursday, I attended the Redwood Coast Energy Authority's virtual, like Zoom type meeting, and I have nothing to report other than it was nice to be able to be back to see the members that attended, and they were happy to see me present in that two-dimensional form. On Friday, I think it was probably when the initial placement of the banners for the high school kids for the East High or College of the Redwoods attendees and the actual graduating seniors for Fortuna High was placed on Fortuna Boulevard. It was beautiful. The wind hadn't come to bend the bases, and it was beautiful. It was just drove the full length, made a big U-turn, and came back to enjoy looking at it heading back southbound. So whoever was incorporated into doing that and organizing it, he did an awesome job. Last but not least, I love my country. It tears me apart to see what is happening here locally, but in worst case scenarios in a lot of the cities across the United States, where pent up dissension for conditions that have been in existence for 100 years are coming into fruition in evilsments. And I wish well the people that are in harm's way to be safe. I wish well for businesses that have been contributing to their cities as opportunities for people to shop, to not suffer damage and destruction. I wish well that the hatred that people have will hopefully wean away, and there'll be common sense that comes into play. They have to sit down and actually be patient for change, because being destructive and being a vandal and being a tyrant and being a terrorist is not the way to make any change. It actually extends it longer. God bless America. God bless our troops. And may you all be safe. And I love my country. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dean. Mike?
Well, we finally got an opportunity to have another HCOG meeting, and it was interesting to have that as a Zoom meeting. Luckily, we've been having ours and some webinars, so I was a little bit used to it already. One of the big things that's coming up that will affect Fortuna and really affect Riadel and Scotia is a new mobility on demand, they call it. It's redoing the bus services. And I think Tammy may know more about that, so I'll let her speak on that some more. But it's something I want to maybe get together with Cameron or Kevin and see a little more into what it's about, because before I make any kind of rash decisions. We, as we all did the League of California Cities Division meeting, and there was a couple of webinars, one on reopening and the reopening City Hall and city services. And it was pretty interesting, and I'm sure that staff has run into that and maybe attended it, but they're developing a plan to follow to safely have us be able to serve our citizens. And that's a good thing. Open City Hall back up. I'm looking forward to some of our local businesses being open again and getting some revenue back in their pockets to pay for these last 3 months worth of rent and insurance and PG&E and such as that. Even with the doors closed, there are fixed costs that continue on, and I'm aware of that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Mike. Jeremy?
So FBID is going to meet tomorrow. We're going to have another Zoom meeting. We had a Zoom meeting 2 weeks ago. Diana has been working with the County Office of Emergency Services as part of the task force to support businesses. She's been helping to screen local businesses that are applying for their certificate of compliance to reopen. A friendly reminder to all that it's my understanding that even if your business was deemed essential from day one, that you still have to get the compliance certified to be in compliance with the current shelter-in-place phase 2 reopening process. To all the businesses out there, your city supports you as you reopen and return to as much of a new normal as possible. Please let us know if there's anything that the city can do and FBID can do to help in support of your reopening and your businesses. Regarding Parks and Rec, we discussed earlier about the summer fun program, so more to come there. We haven't had another meeting since. I have to give a shout out to those guys. The medians looked terrific. They were all mowed up. The trees were all pruned up. And then you add those graduation signs, like Dean said, and it was a sight to be seen. I participated in the Humboldt Cruisers Cruise Night for the last couple of Fridays, and then this past Saturday, honoring our seniors from graduation. And rain or shine, there were people out cruising, so it's pretty cool to see, and I hope it continues. I love the smiles on people's faces. Speaking of graduation, I went to Fortuna High's graduation, and I have to tell you that I was so impressed with how everyone worked together to pull out a different but still memorable 2020 COVID graduation. The staff there at Fortuna High acted like they'd done this 100 times, and it went so smoothly. I was so proud of our community for supporting the kids and making that night so special. On a personal note, I was there to watch our foreign exchange student Go graduate, and he has been a part of our family for the last year when he lived with us for 4 months of the beginning of the school year. He leaves tomorrow morning to return home to Japan, but I wanted my report to reflect that we love him. We love sharing our home with him, and we wish him all the best with his experiences in our special little town. He graduated as a senior, but he still goes back home to take on 4 more years of school, and our goal is to go watch him graduate there. I hope everybody remains safe, and I appreciate everyone's adhering to the shelter-in-place recommendations, and have a good night.
Thank you, Jeremy. Tammy?
Okay, I have a Humboldt Transit Authority meeting Wednesday, which will be discussing all of this, so I don't have a lot to report on the buses just yet. I actually have 4 meetings this week, so most of my reporting will be at the next meeting. I do have to thank the park staff for getting up at the crack of dawn bright and early before everybody was out to put those signs down the median, and they did a great job. It was very impressive to drive down there, and I'm so proud of our city for coming together and doing something so nice for our graduates in the school for doing that. That's all I really have to report.
Thank you, Tammy. So again, I would just like to echo the pictures in the median, and I've seen several people say we should just make that a yearly tradition now, because it was so powerful, so emotional, and it was just the greatest sight. You know, it ties in right with when you drive down Main Street when they do the flags. So very proud of our community for doing that. I've seen a lot of people say they would step up and make donations so that we could continue that tradition. So we'll see. We attended a League of California Cities meeting via Zoom, and just want you to know that your council steps up and is engaged and working for you. Fortuna had all 5 of our council members in the meeting, and other cities had 1 or 2. And so, you know, we work really hard to represent all of you and to keep current with information that's out there. I think that's about all I have. I have also been enjoying the cruising, and hope everybody continues to behave themselves so we can continue to drive around like young people and honk our horns, and my grandkids love it. And they go, honk again, honk again. So, you know, it gets them out of the house, gives them something to look forward to, and now they know what cruising is all about. So that's kind of funny. We do have 2 closed session items. So I'll read those off, and then if you have any comments you want to make before we adjourn to closed session, you can join our Zoom meeting with those comments. The first one is public employment pursuant section 54957 of the California Government Code, title Chief of Police. The second one is conference with real property negotiator pursuant to section 54956.8 of the Government Code, vacant land along Eel River and 1320 Riverwalk Drive. Negotiating parties for the city of Fortuna is City Manager Merritt Perry, and Troy Land as negotiating parties. Under negotiation is price and terms of payment. So if anyone would like to comment before we go into closed session, please join our Zoom meeting. All right, receiving no comments, we need a motion to adjourn to closed session.
Make a motion, we adjourn to closed session.
You can't do that. You got Tammy do it. Rescind.
She can
All right.
second it.
She did. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.